Yes, I'm Mara Smith, founder and CEO of Inspiro Tequila, like you said. And a lifetime ago, I was a lawyer at a large law firm in Chicago. Then I worked in corporate strategy at McDonald's Corporation. Then most recently, a stay-at-home mom, and was always looking to start my own company. And it just happened to be that tequila was the right fit for me. So, being a tequila drinker for years, I was looking for an additive free tequila because I didn't realize everything I was drinking had additives. And when I didn't find one, I thought, could we create something that is very focused on a thoughtful female consumer based on the look, taste, aroma, and also that was additive free and just a really approachable tequila. So started in February 2020 because I had impeccable timing right before the entire world shut down.
Right.
And yeah, so now a little over 3 years in.
That's awesome. I love that approachable tequila. I think that's so brilliant, and that's just a wonderful phrase. Allison Evans, please come join us in the spotlight as well. Allison is co-founder of Say So. Please introduce yourself in your own words also.
Thanks for the intro. So yes, I'm Allison Evans, one of the co-founders of Say So. We actually have created a new product category in the mixer space. So it's the first ever craft cocktail mocktail in tea bag format. We took all natural ingredients, dehydrated them, and put them in a tea bag. So all you have to do is infuse it in cold water and spirits for a delicious drink at home. My co-founder Chloe and I met in business school. We really created the product for ourselves because we thought it was so challenging to make cocktails at home. Other people we knew and surveyed had the same issue, and all the other options on the market were either super high in sugar or tasted artificial and didn't use real ingredients. So we wanted something that would be quick and easy, but still elevated and complex in flavor. And we're able to achieve that with our dehydrated ingredients. We also launched May 2020 when we graduated business school, so in COVID like Mara, but actually officially launched with our commercial product in market only last June, so about a year ago.
Wow, well, congratulations. I have to say, I have some Say So packets right now in my top drawer. I came across them and I thought I was just fascinated, and they're amazing. So super cool. I'd also, and finally, I'd like to welcome our amazing moderator and longtime member, Sarah Stein. She is right now Chief Marketing Officer at Homebody. Sarah and Sarah, I will let you introduce yourself as well in your own words, but briefly before you do that, just want to mention that Sarah is a sales and marketing executive. She developed her expertise at Estee Lauder, and then Chanel, Procter and Gamble. And also, I know you've done some great things with Nike and Diageo, which is very on point for today. And you've done so many other amazing things that I will now let you take the mic and tell us more.
Oh, well, thank you, Breen. I'm so happy to be here. So yes, I worked extensively on Diageo at MKTG. And I love working with founders. So that is what I love. I love, making something out of nothing and bringing their vision to life. And Homebody, I have to say, unbelievable seamless recliner couch. AD said we're more comfortable than the RH Cloud. Had to throw it out there. But I'm thrilled to be here today. We're all about spirits, and we'll get going. So it's really interesting that both Allison and Mara launched their brand during COVID. I mean, how do you think that, we'll start with Allison first because her name starts with an A, but how do you think that affected you? Do you think it made you just, it was such a challenging time, and how did it impact your decisions, and how has it morphed?
So a lot, we came up with the idea for Say So in 2019, actually, in this startup bootcamp class Chloe and I took together in business school. So it's funny, people always think that we came up with the idea for drinking at home during the time of COVID, when that's what a lot of people were stuck doing or turning to do. And we actually didn't. The idea started in 2019, and kind of we worked on it as we were students while taking classes full time. So it was interesting to then like kind of be graduating in the time of COVID when like the at-home shopping and direct to consumer was so heightened. So it actually helped us. At that time, we were still hand making all of our products, mostly in my childhood home kitchen, actually. So we were selling out all the time because we weren't really producing that much inventory. And that it was an interesting way to start, where, you know, it's like, it's at COVID, the product is really highly demanded. And that really led us to be like, okay, like we've got to pursue this full time. Like this product is really in high demand. And as people are getting back out there, consuming at home has still stayed high. So our product has stayed something true that customers want. So it was an interesting start with all parts, but we think that like at home off-premise consumption is still growing and staying strong.
Yeah, no, that's what the data shows, that things that happened during COVID that you like, you're continuing doing. Mara, same question.
Yes. So there's kind of the difficulties, obviously, and then the things that I think were kind of like the silver lining for me, at least. COVID difficulty was that I started this and I could not get down to production in Mexico, right? So I kept planning trips, and like every time I planned it, they're like, "Oh, it's shut down. The distillery shut down." So, and I couldn't, and then I was worried about getting back in the country. So I could not get down until May of 2021 was the first time I was able to get there. And so I was relying on people handling things, you know, especially when it's your baby, not being there for production and getting sent samples. And like, it was very difficult I'm kind of like hands-on, maybe controlling, but anyways, so I couldn't get down there. But the good part for me was that I was able to connect with so many people. So at re-entering the workforce, first of all, after being out of the workforce for many years and entering into a totally new industry, I really had to build like a community, and I had to build a community from scratch, having like absolutely no business connections and any connections in the spirits world. I think I was given so many more opportunities. I mean, I probably connected with Breen during COVID. I probably connected with so many people, and I was able to like become part of these communities and networks. And women, so many women, especially female leaders and founders, were willing to take like some time, like a half hour on a Zoom, because Zoom became, you know, commonplace. And before, one, I would have been geographically like very limited as far as who I could connect with, because it wouldn't have occurred that I could connect with people like all over the country. And it would have required like a 2-hour coffee for someone. And are they going to take that kind of time to meet with like a new founder who just wants to like get some guidance? And so that was very helpful. I mean, I built like a really great community of kind of women who I feel like are behind me. And I was able to do that, I think, because of COVID and being able to do a real quick connection with people that maybe otherwise I wouldn't have been able to.
No, that makes sense. So I would say you guys both use COVID to your advantage, which is our mothers would all be proud of us. Because you know what they say.
Yeah.
Mara, you started your career as an attorney, and how has that helped navigate your path? I think I think both of you have really strong backgrounds for a startup, like really great. When you look at founders and what was their foundation going in, attorney and HBS are two big leaders. So Mara, tell us how that has helped you.
Yes. So I think a lot of my background is very analytical. So actually, before even law school, like I studied accounting and I'm a CPA. So I think I have like all the analytical parts of it that are very helpful. And then in corporate strategy, probably marketing was this like big black hole for me that I did not comprehend at all. But I actually speak to a lot of legal groups. I'm speaking to the Chicago Bar Association again in a couple of weeks, and like law firms, because I see a lot of skills that you hone as an attorney as directly applicable to running a business. Like, right, well, one, I worked at like the largest law firm at the time in Chicago, like work as far as work ethic and being able to, I mean, and the funny thing is I now work more. I thought I'd never work more than when I was an associate at a huge law firm, and I do now. But just to kind of like head down, being able to focus and work really hard and diligently, which is what I think is very much required as a founder of a startup. Being efficient with your time, like when you're billing by, the increments of 8 minutes, like you learn how to be like super efficient with your time. And I do think that kind of like overall strategy and being able to think strategically, I, I think I also kind of built a lot of those skills. And lastly, one that's really important that I feel like we've totally lost is writing skills. So I am constantly having to, there's just constant writing involved. If I'm pitching us for something, if it's for a pitch competition or to be featured in something, or, even email and newsletters and things like that, like those writing skills that you learn, I found really helpful because I just end up surprisingly doing a lot more writing than I probably ever would have anticipated, like running a tequila startup.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Breen, you are also an attorney. Is there anything you can add that you see with founders, if you want to expand on it? And Julie, you want to add on this one too, we would love it.
Amazing. And I was sitting here listening to everything you said, Mara, and I'm just nodding and smiling because I second everything you said. And I also did not think I would ever work more than, when I was a junior associate at a white shoe big law firm. And in fact, yes, you do as a founder. And love the writing point. I think that is super key. And another thing, when I was listening to you speak, I had a couple of thoughts. One is that I feel like a lot of times the kind of top 20 ways a startup struggles or fails, that you have real insight into, a number of those things when you have a background as a lawyer, especially as a generalist, which is my background, being the helping smaller companies scale and grow. You kind of have this secret insight as to, some of those pitfalls that startups, if they don't have that background, they don't even really know what they don't know. They don't realize it's a pitfall. So, I'm thinking of like IP, I'm thinking of, like whether it's a trademark thing or, something related to insurance. So I had that thought. And then the other thought I had was problem solving. I think your job as a lawyer is to solve problems, and your job as a founder, often the hardest part, right? Executing, it's solving a problem. So I think there's a lot of parallels. Love that question.
I agree. I'm just a pain to have as a client for another lawyer now.
Yes, I agree with that too.
Julie, can we invite you
Yeah.
to share your thoughts? Give us a little brief intro on why I'm cold calling you from the crowd, and then everyone will completely understand. And then, we'll circle back to Allison.
Yeah, so I'm Julie Kent. I was, 25 plus years in the alcohol beverage industry, and as a lawyer, both with the Remy Cointreau USA company, and then most recently, Chief Legal Officer at Heineken. And I have been so fortunate to be part of the fourth floor from practically the beginning. I was at their soft launch and have been cheering them from the sidelines. So that's me. And yeah, I think what's interesting, love what you all have said, problem solving, of course, a little bit of that strategic thinking, also, negotiation and all those great skills from a lawyer. I think what's really interesting, Mara, for you is, and I think it's interesting in lawyers in general, because most people think of lawyers as being very risk averse, and certainly being very mindful of risk assessment and risk mitigation. And yet sometimes being a founder is the riskiest thing you can do. So I think it's actually a lovely combination. Hats off.
Perfect. So Allison, you come from HBS, which is definitely many amazing founders and come from there. And then also you have a touch of a retail background too. So I'm wondering, like, your best nugget from there, that, how that's helped you.
Yeah, so prior to HBS, I worked at Macy's merchandising group. So the private label brands sold at Macy's, like right out of college, I did product development. So actually getting clothing made. And the process of like seeing a product go from like A to Z, and then seeing people on the streets like wearing the clothes that I helped made, like we would like snap pictures and then like send it into our team and be like, oh, spotted, like American Rag was like this young men's brand I was on. But I loved that experience. And I think that, you know, getting to make a product from A to Z and then seeing people like use it and love it is so fulfilling to me. And so I never really thought that I would go from like making clothing to like making a CPG product, but that experience has kind of translated with me, and just like the excitement. There's obviously so many ups and downs in entrepreneurship, but like every like 5-star review that we get on our site, it's kind of like yes, and like motivation to like keep going, and you can see that you're really making something that resonates with people. Is something that I really liked from my retail experience, which was different. I think product development is more unique of a retail experience than, you know, like a buying or planning or something that, you know, people typically do in retail. And then at HBS, kind of the same thing. Both Chloe and I don't think we actually went into business school thinking that we'd become founders right out of school. But with its increasing popularity and interest amongst the students, there's so many more programs that the school is offering now, which I think is fantastic. So like I mentioned, we actually came up with the idea for Say So in a startup bootcamp class we took together our first year. So it was a week-long intensive program where we went through customer interviewing, prototypes, gathering feedback and pitching. And I think that, you know, even in that like 1 week intensive boot camp class, like just learning how always speak to the customer, like, you know, don't like the customer comes first, and that kind of mentality as well when you're building something is super important. Even though, like I've said, Chloe and I made the product for ourselves, like, and we are the customer, always being in touch with your customer, listening to feedback. I love even just like reaching out when we get like a review, just being like, hey, like, would love to chat with you. And people are like, this is the founder? And I'm like, yes, it's me. Or when we like are working markets on the weekends, like these artisan farmers markets, and people are tasting and they're always ask questions. And then they're like, oh, it's your company? And I'm like, who do you think is running this? Like, yes, like it's just us two. We're doing everything. And like, we'd love to chat with you and hear your feedback and use these insights to shape how the company is going to grow. The other thing too, similar to what Mara said about women's groups that we've really relied on like through HBS, is just really other founder networks. There's different WhatsApp groups and things where we can like post a question and somebody else has probably been through it and can give a suggestion, or even section mates of mine who have raised a ton of money. I can always just shoot them a text and be like, hey, like, how did you approach this, and hop on a quick call. And, you know, everyone is all over Boston now, even internationally, and you're still able to get a quick chat in. So I think that overall, like, network building and not being afraid to ask questions. Like people are always like, how did you do it? And it's like by asking and learning. And I think a lot of founders probably really feel that they don't know what they're doing and they're just figuring it out on the go. And that's definitely the case for me. And I think relying on networks and not being afraid to ask is a huge learning as a founder. Like,
that's great. And it's also, in both of you, it's like an ad for the fourth floor, being that, you know, you may not go to HBS, but you can join the fourth floor. And I know our community is just as welcoming and helpful. Pat, do you want to share a little bit about, you know, you also were probably, I think you have a retail past and a little perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to go back to the fourth floor real quick. That's why we have this forum called Gives and Gets, because if you don't ask, you won't get. So I think it's great that you embrace that, Allison. And we share, yeah, a lot of similarities. So I was in product development for a wholesaler and sold into retail, specifically Macy's, Federated, all of the big box retailers. So I totally get what you were saying about product development. I love it. And that's what led me to invent my beauty product that I brought to market internationally. So I went through that. I love that, creating something out of nothing. And I love what you said about community, Mara, because what I also learned, and I hope I'm implementing now, is that as a vendor, as a startup founder who wants to get placement and shelf space and whatever we're striving for, it's so important to also think of the person you're selling, the company you're selling, as a community partner as well, and that your interests are their interests, because it takes a partnership to make it successful. And I think sometimes it's hard to remember that because you're struggling to, fight for what you want and get that relationship off the ground. But really, if just kind of reframing it, and it's a community to make sure that your product is successful for them. Is kind of my takeaway.
No, understanding their challenges, because if you can answer their challenges, it's resolved. Changing speeds, Mara, tell me a little bit about how you built your team, especially with COVID and being hands-on in the distance, and tell me about that.
Yes. So first I have to say, Julie mentioned something about like being risk averse. And I just have to say that I was very risk averse. Like I wasn't young when I was able to go into that entrepreneurial track. I feel like it came with age to become less risk averse. I'm as a young girl, I wanted to be a Supreme Court justice. So I don't think there's any more secure job than what you can have for life. So I definitely wanted job security. So this is a very new mentality for me of being able to take on some risk as a founder. But yes, building a team. So here's what I would say for what I have found personally effective for us is that I use a lot of 1099s and consultants. And even my national sales director, who is now full-time, first I had her on for 8 months as a consultant. I just think having that flexibility and making sure that it's the right fit and we have the right, the person on the team has the right vision, especially as a small company, being careful about making decisions that are going to be like a little more long term. And so I have appreciated having that flexibility. So like marketing, for example, all those channels are outsourced. I use like small agencies for each of the different marketing channels, or I'll use like a freelancer for that. And I found that personally working for us because I think that everybody really specializes, like basically the agencies that have pitched they can do like everything. I found like that is not accurate, and they do like something really well. So for us to be able to have one agency that does like email and one that does paid and one that does organic and separate PR, like that's worked well for us, and using smaller. And I've changed, and also it allows me to change. I changed social media agencies 3 times. So right, I started with like a bigger one, and then I found that like the person they put on my account, I was like so kind of low level on their as far as on where they prioritized us, that it worked better for me to move to a smaller agency that would, prioritize us more, and where I'd actually be talking to the founder of the agency on a regular basis, who would be actively involved, as opposed to just handing me off to like their newest, social media person, which is what I found the first time. So that's how I built it, like using just a lot of different consultants and figuring out. And it's also allowed me to figure out like what would be my next hire and what is the most crucial role. And I still think for us and the type of business I'm in, and because we're very retail focused and chain retail focused, sales, that is always going to be like where I think it's the most important to have someone who's dedicated and full time. And I still envision us for at least a while being able to outsource like marketing aspects. Financials, like it's kind of funny. My father-in-law is a former CFO of a company, and he's retired, and I like took him out of retirement and have had my books kept by him since the beginning. I think he's looking to offload that role. So I'm probably going to be bringing someone on to handle the books because I'm not sure he really wants to do our journal entries anymore. But just I feel like finding people to fill those gaps and then being able to determine what roles are the most important to fill and bring on in a full-time capacity.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So Allison, we all know startups are super tough. Tell us how you set your priorities, especially with budget and, determining who's gonna, what's gonna be first.
Yeah, that's actually like probably our current biggest challenge, is that. So we're a team of 2, and like Mara, we also have leaned into the contractor agency approach, more so because of the budget reason, and something that from a legal perspective too, always making sure your contracts are month to month and you're not roped into long retainers and et cetera, that we've gotten burned by that when we first started out. But really, it's tough. We're currently fundraising, but the market is also challenging and our budget is extremely tight. So trying to see where we think can make the biggest difference in our business is where we'll kind of pick and choose, and we shift that a lot as well. So before we did have a marketing agency for a set number of months, and now we actually stopped that channel, and it's me and Canva doing our marketing assets, and we just hired instead like a sales team for the New York area, because also we're having a lot of similarities, but we're really leaning into growing the retail channel, and you need feet on the ground, you need people checking, and especially in this industry, things that are so important like velocity. It's not like the store is giving you, oh, this is how many you sold this week. Like they're not really providing that info. So the team is on the ground taking pictures of the shelf. Oh, this is how many's here this week. This is how many's there that week. Like you're kind of figuring that out on your own. And we really need support in that area to, help with our velocities to stay on shelf. So a lot of people too are like, oh, congratulations, you're launching in this retailer, but that's really just like the bare minimum task. And then staying on shelf is going to be a lot more challenging. So we really want those channels to grow and be successful. So that's where we're leaning in right now with our resources. We wish we could do it all, but when you're so lean, you have to get also most efficient with your time. And then unfortunately, some areas don't flourish as much, but how can you continue to grow the overall bottom line?
No, that's great. And I agree so much. Like just getting in, that's just the beginning of the journey. I always joke that being a founder is an Ironman triathlon. So people think, it's a marathon and you create the product and you're done. It's like, no, you just got out of the water. It's now time to jump on the bike and start biking, because you've got a sales and market, and then of course fundraising, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So question for both of you: what unique challenges have you faced as a female founder in beverage or beverage adjacent, and how did you overcome them? Like one little piece is, the rumor is that distributors are primarily men. I'm not sure if that's still true. It was very much true when I was working on Diageo. And so how do you manage that? And then, in comparing that with the CPG world. Go ahead, Mara.
I was gonna say, well, for me, because I'm in the alcohol industry, yes, all the rooms I'm always pitching every room I go into. If it's, sales teams, distributors, yes, the vast majority are men. And in fact, our last, we were going to meet a sales broker team that we have up in Michigan. And on the way, I was going with my national sales director, and I'm like, let's do the over under of how many women will be in the room. And we literally bet on the way there to see how many women will be in the room. And there was one. So, but What I say actually in the alcohol industry, which those of you who have experience in this industry, I actually say the harder part for me, yes, being a woman, like I stand out, but I actually think it's not bad that we stand out because there are a lot of people who are looking to diversify. And I think that's been a benefit of ours is that they actually want some diversity and to see some diversity on the shelves now. The harder part is coming in as an outsider. As Julie can attest to, people have been in the industry for a really, really long time and worked their way up and coming in and kind of gaining credibility as an outsider to the industry. That's where I felt like actually that's where I put some of the legal skills to work as far as research. I mean, I researched to be as prepared as I possibly could before I even had the first conversation with someone, just make sure I knew what I was talking about. Everything from how it works with compliance and 3-tier to how the tequila industry works. Like I thought I had to go in over prepared to be taken seriously because people have really worked their way up in the industry and been in for a long time. So I actually thought for me, that was a little bit harder to gain acceptance, which now I feel like I've been embraced by the spirits community. But to gain acceptance as someone who like I didn't have experience. I never worked for a distributor before. I didn't work for a supplier before. I didn't work in bars before, like who's this lawyer mom who now thinks she knows spirits? Um, so I think that was like a bigger hurdle, I think in the industry.
No, I can envision that simply because, I spent decades in beauty and there are so many things where it was like, it's a given. Of course, that's how you do it. And you meet someone who's from outside the industry and they're surprised. So, so I totally get that. Allison, so tell me about CPG, gender friendly. I would think it's gender friendly. And also I would also think your retail background gives you a little bit of the secret lingo and the acronym. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I do find the CPG community to be pretty helpful of the community as a whole, gender non-biased. There are some great groups like Startup CPG, for example, is one where it's just like thousands of people in the CPG industry in this Slack group. And, you can post a question in a variety of topics and get multiple responses back. So I find that everyone is kind of rooting for one another's success in that industry. So I found that to be very helpful too. And as a full newcomer, I actually find it to be very different than what I did at Macy's. Like asking others has been super helpful because they've been through it before. So same thing too with distribution and CPG. We had no idea about all the steps needed to get in. Like we were trying to submit ourselves to all these retailers, but you have to be with a distributor, but a distributor won't take you on unless you have enough doors for that distributor to like unlock a distribution center that they'll take you on for. So it was kind of like a little chicken and the egg. And you're like, well, how do you get the distributor to take you on if you need to be in so many doors, and who's going to take a chance on you with like however many 35 plus doors you need to unlock the distributor. So for us, bringing on this sales team has been a huge help, and it is run by a man. I don't know if that is coincidence or not, but he's already friends with everyone at all of the stores, a lot of natural grocer, knows exactly when we need to be applying in, when category review is, because if you miss the category review, if we just started in category review with Whole Foods was in March, well, you have to wait till next March to submit for cocktail mixer. So there kind of goes literally a year where you just you cannot do anything, because that's just how the incumbent industries work. So I think it's, again, still related to trying to ask for help. But having somebody like back to the hiring and sales who kind of knows the ins and outs of that has been really, really helpful for us when we were getting started on it.
No, that's super helpful. So switching gears, and we have some audience questions that we know of, and then if you have additional ones, please put them in the chat. I'm monitoring it. but we do have some to start. But one thing that was interesting was innovation. So, I mean, you both are highly innovative. How do you stay on top of the trends while you're also managing the day to day? How do you balance that? That's one more ball to juggle.
Right. Well, for me, I read a lot of like industry reports. I mean, everything from general CPG. So I like just to learn what trends are. Like that's why I'm involved in like outside the spirits world, like the Chicago Naturally Networks or Startup CPG or things like that. I like to see kind of what's going on. I went to Expo West, not because there are alcohol brands there, but just to like learn and see what's on trend in the better for you category. Because some people think of tequila as like a better for you option if you're drinking. So I like to like look outside and other channels. I also think being an outsider, a benefit is that you don't know what you don't know. So I kind of think I think innovatively in how we approach most things, just because I don't know the old paradigms of like, well, you're supposed to do it like this way, and you're supposed to, great examples, most alcohol brands are built on the on-premise, which means bars and restaurants. That's how they get consumer trial and people to know about the brand. And then they move to more off-premise. We're like completely flipped that upside down because we started this in COVID. So there was no on-premise. So we focused on like digital marketing. And now I focus on doing like women's events, going to professional women's organizations, and they're getting what we call liquid to lips. And not trying to compete in like a really expensive way to compete is like trying to get menu placement at a bar or restaurant. Like I can't compete with the Casamigos of the world. So looking at it like a little bit differently, or we have a Rosa Reposado. I'm like, I like rosé wine, but I feel terrible after all the sugar. So like, can we age tequila in rosé wine barrels? I'm like, let's do it. Well, little did I know, it's like next impossible to find rosé wine barrels because rosé is a young wine that's not traditionally aged. So I like started scouring like the earth to find rosé wine barrels, and then we finally like sourced them. But everyone's like, okay, just forget it. Let's use these barrels. I'm like, no, we're gonna find rosé wine barrels. And so we actually have the first tequila aged in rosé wine barrels. But I think it's because I didn't go in thinking one particular way that it kind of opens maybe more possibilities and options. So that's also why I think it's good to look at other verticals and what they're doing and how they're doing things maybe a little bit, differently, learning from, other brands.
No, that's super helpful. Allison, what are your secrets to, I mean, your whole product is an innovation. So how do you, it's so fresh. How do you keep it fresh? You're so fresh, but how do you stay, continue to monitor the trends?
Well, in terms of even like coming up with our cocktails, for example, like we always wanted to take the most popular cocktails that are most ordered and put our own spin on it. So we're kind of leaning into some flavor trends in that way. So like with the margarita, there's hundreds of margarita mixes, but the spicy margarita, and when we first started out, we were using jalapeno peppers and piquin chilies and this unique blend of spices to give that extra nuanced flavor. And then when we launched our Moscow Mule and Paloma, instead of just being a standard Moscow Mule and Paloma, we put flavor twists on them. So ours is a honey rosemary Moscow Mule and a cardamom Paloma. So we always wanted to make the drinks that were super popular, but make them elevated. So in addition, we're using unique ingredients that you really most likely won't have at home, like cardamom seeds and stuff like that. So it's an elevated spin. And then for our future product development down the line, as we're planning on a roadmap, like same thing, taking both in customer feedback. We actually surveyed our customers, seeing what they're looking for next, what flavors they want, if they want with sugar, without sugar, and then taking that information with market trends in terms of flavors that are on the rise. We also were at Expo West. I actually saw Mara there while I was sampling, and just seeing like how we can put our spin on what's to come. So keeping with all those trends too. Also for us, we're also able to play in the non-alcoholic space. So that market is also really taking off, and our customers use our products as mocktails as well. So keeping a pulse on both like the alc and non-alc trends.
It works really well our tequila though, I must say. We've collaborated now a couple times. It does do really good
So I
casting.
have, I mean, you're making my mouth water. And so I think everyone is. So we need to know where you're distributed now and your future distribution plans. We'll start with Allison. You talked a teeny bit about it, and then we'll segue to Mara.
Yeah, so we're sold on our website, drinksayso.com, on Amazon, and then we're currently in like 35 plus independent retailers. In New York, we are on the GoPuff app, Drizzly, and Morton Williams grocery stores. And then next month, we're excited, we're launching in Cinderella, Gourmet Garage, Fairway, and ShopRite stores.
Congrats.
And thank you. We'll also be launching for West Coasters if anyone's tuning in from Southern California and Bristol Farms. So we're excited to get the retail push going. Excited and nervous at the same time, to be honest.
But it sounds like you have great support, because to be in retail, you have to be like a super strong partner, and it sounds like you're in good hands for that. Mara, same question.
Yes. So we also sell online on inspirotequila.com, and we ship to like 45 states, but we're in market. We're in retail all throughout Illinois. So I think we're probably about like, I don't even know, maybe like 500 doors, all the major chains throughout Illinois. And then we just opened the state of Michigan in February. So we're in Michigan now. And we are rolling out probably 4 more states this summer. So you'll be able to find us in more locations. And then probably another 3 or 4 in the fall. So our plate is really full right now, trying to navigate that because we're alcohol. So for those of you who know, we have to sell through a distributor in every single state we enter into. And it looks different in every state and it works differently in every state. So I'm registering and doing compliance in all these states, then finding the right distributor partner state by state. So that's kind of what we're in the process of right now. And
no, but it sounds like it's really moving. Sounds like it's really moving. So Marissa Glennon has a great question. So thank you, Marissa. I'm going to start with Allison on this, but I'm curious for Mara's, she directed it to Allison, but I'm curious for Mara as well. So spirits, this whole category usually starts on premise. You both started off premise because of COVID. How, being digital first, how is that seen as a proof point? Do people see it as competition, or how do you balance that?
We're actually not targeting on premise as
no, but I mean like other distribution. Do they basically it's the whole piece of of D2C versus with a retail partner, so not on premise, of course.
Right.
Sorry.
Right. I think that it's a little segregated, at least in CPG. Like when we've been opening doors with distributors, they're not asking for our like direct to consumer metrics. I think that they want to know velocity, and they want to know how fast we're going to move on shelf. So that's why we really kind of have to bank on them liking our product and taking a chance on us to get us a certain number of doors and then grow based on velocity. So I find it to be a completely separate channel than direct to consumer. I think like fundraising, it's obviously the investors want to know our direct to consumer metrics, our CAC, our revenue, and all of that. But in terms of like growing in retail, it's separate than direct to consumer. What we can do is use like online ads to help drive people into stores and buy that way. So there's newer startups out there now too, where you can do rebate programs through text that offer a Venmo. So it's something we're actually testing out right now, where we drive you in store. If you buy 2 boxes, we'll Venmo you $5 off, and that's something that we can advertise on our direct to consumer channels, and then B, we gain that phone number for follow-up marketing, and C, hopefully we are increasing our velocities. So there's ways where we could use the direct to consumer channel to help power our in-store velocities, but like in terms of metrics for opening distributors, if that was the question, we haven't found it to be that much of an overlap.
Oh, that's great. Mara, how about for you?
Yes.
Again, you are
Allison,
the on-premise. Yeah.
yes, by the way, if you want any, we use that program, the rebate one.
Oh, yeah.
So
Mhm.
just if you want any information, we've been testing that to drive to retail. So for us, I'd say different types of DTC. So we're alcohol, so it's never really direct to consumer. There always has to be. We're always going
Right.
through the 3 tiers, right? So fulfillment, but I think for us, it's helped guide us into markets, so we can use some of that data from direct to consumer of like, oh, look at where our customer base is. It makes sense for us to enter into this market because look at the customer base, like where the majority of our customers are coming. So I think using it a little bit that way. Then I look at it as D2C, but more like marketplaces. And being on marketplaces actually help our retailers, right? So being on like a Reserve Bar because we're on Reserve Bar or a Drizzly, or once we're in retailers on Instacart, all those that are really supporting retail accounts, Reserve Bar and Drizzly supporting like independent retailers, and then an Instacart kind of more chain driven. And then I actually apply for every single kind of anything they have for support for women owned or minority owned businesses. So for example, Instacart has they have special marketing programs and things like that on that. Reserve Bar has an SCI program for diverse brands. Drizzly, I'm part of their accelerator. So like every one of those where I can like somehow utilize it to help drive to retail and get any like marketing dollars or support or access to data. That's how I use all those kind of like marketplaces also.
No, that's super helpful. So we are coming towards the end. My last question for each of you, and then I'll hand it back to Breen and Kat, is the best and worst advice you ever received? Because I don't know, people always ask the best advice, but I think the worst advice can also be helpful. So we'll start with who wants to go first? Allison.
The best advice I have received, which I feel like I've said it a few times, but to echo Kat, if you don't ask, you don't get. And so just not being afraid to ask and follow up too. If you send an email and you don't hear back, don't just like let it lie, like follow up again. It's likely, and I've done this too for people who email me. It's likely not that they don't want to answer, just they have so many emails, they might have missed it or they're not getting to it, but just ask, follow up, because if you don't ask, you don't get. Let me have Mara do her best advice while I think about a worst one for one moment.
Okay, and I'm going to say, chime in on the follow-up, I think is so right on, because I do a bunch of mentoring and people will say, I sent the email, and I'm like, did you follow up? Everyone's got so much going on and people want to be helpful, but you need to remind them a little bit. Okay, back to Mara.
So best advice is probably not something someone specifically told me, but something I've been trying to implement in my life. And it's based on a Sarah Blakely quote, where if someone could do something 80% as well as you can, let them do it. And I've really been trying to implement that because basically I've been trying to handle too much. And so looking at it that like, if someone can do it 80% as well, like hand it off, like let go of it. I tried to do that a lot on, for example, like social media, where I told you I like to rewrite everything. Well, like it's not worth my time to rewrite every single caption that goes up on social media. So I'm like, let it go, let someone else do it. So really trying to implement that in my life, including with my family. I'm like, yeah, that's not really worth my time. You can handle that. So I was trying to like, delegate a little more and let people take over on things. And there's probably some things that they're doing way better than me anyways, that they're more efficient and can do it more quickly and better. Worst advice, it's not like a specific thing, but anytime someone tries to convince me and I make any decisions that really like aren't like in my gut and like aren't sitting well, I always regret that decision. So if someone convinces me and I'm like, that just did not feel right, or that person didn't feel right to me, or something didn't feel right about it. And if I get convinced to kind of like go down that road, even in like production, like I had like consultants out there, like it just wasn't like fitting anymore, it wasn't feeling right. Like then I made the decision and got rid of it. Like if if it's not sitting well, I really do believe in like kind of going more with my gut instinct. And if I get convinced otherwise, I generally am not happy with that decision.
I think that's really, really valid advice. Allison, do you have an example, or I'm going to go to Julie because I want to hear what her best advice is. She might have something. So,
Get away.
okay.
Oh my gosh, I was not ready for this. Really not ready.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. Best advice, I guess, in the founder, rather than life in general, I do a bit of advising some other small companies. I think it would be, goodness, so much of what you guys have said, but I think it would be to really be mindful of the people you surround yourself with, choiceful around who you want to have as advisors, because I've seen some people, bring people on, same thing as I think you said, Mara, and employees, but just being really purposeful in doing that. And I think it's difficult for founders sometimes because you're so excited that there are people around that are excited about what you're doing, but that would probably be when I think about good advice.
No, that's great.
Yeah,
That's great. No, that makes it so true. And I always think about why are they giving that advice? Is it really to help the business, or do they have another agenda?
Yeah.
Allison, any final words? And then I'll hand it back to Breen.
Yeah, from being super small, I would say like a worst advice sort of thing would be if somebody's like trying to encourage you to make any sort of decision that maybe is like a more expensive option for maybe not necessarily for a qualified reason. Like there were definitely things we spent money on when we first started that looking back is like a dagger in the stomach. Like we could be scrappier, and just like making your own, like kind of like what Mara said too, like looking back, I'm like, oh God, I didn't really feel good about that. And we could have been using that money today if we hadn't like spent it on that. And so I think just assessing where, especially when you're starting up, like where can you be scrappy? Like, if you're going to a trade show, like, do you really need this like really huge fancy XYZ? Or like, could you make a pretty good, maybe it's an adjacent to Mara's quote, but could you make like an 80% as good display for like a lot more of like a savings, and will you still like be presenting your brand well? Like, yes, probably. So just kind of like looking for those opportunity costs, I would say.
That's great. Thank you. It was worth the wait for your response. So Allison and Mara, thank you so much. You guys were amazing. I want to thank the fourth floor